A few months ago, a couple came to me after ending their relationship with their previous agent. Not because he was rude, not because he was incompetent. It was every time they asked a tough question, the agent changed the subject or gave a vague answer. They wanted to know such things as, could they buy in higher rated schools in their price range? They wanted to know what would happen with their property taxes after closing. They wanted to know whether the neighborhoods they were considering were actually performing well in the market. The agent just didn't have answers to those questions, or wouldn't give them. So they came to me, probably because they heard I tend to be blunt. I give the good and the bad news. My name is Stuart Sutton. I've helped buyers and sellers in Georgetown, Texas for over 3 decades. I made it my mission to be the agent who answers questions honestly, even the tough ones, even the uncomfortable ones. So in this video, I'm going to cover 3 things. What agents universally don't tell buyers, no matter what market you're in, what agents in Georgetown, Texas avoid bringing up, or just don't know enough about Georgetown to share with you, and how to find the right agent before you sign anything. But here's the first thing you need to understand before we get into the list. Most agents aren't bad people, but the system they work inside rewards speed over honesty. The faster a deal closes, the faster everybody gets paid. Agents are also trained, genuinely trained, in real estate school, in brokerage firms. Nobody in that system teaches a class on how to voluntarily raise uncomfortable truths or share hard facts about a property or a market. So this video isn't about blaming agents. It's about giving you the information you need so you can ask the right questions, recognize when answers are being avoided or are too vague. So before we jump in, let me throw out a quick reminder if you're not aware. If you are seriously considering a move to Georgetown, Texas, I'll pay for your visit. You heard it right. Instead of repeating it and trying to convince you that you heard it right, you can get details at visit.georgetowntxrealestate.com anytime after you finish this video. Now let's talk about some hard topics. The first point is that agents rarely volunteer information that could kill the deal. This is something that no one in the industry likes to say out loud. If an agent, even your buyer agent, knows something that might make you walk away from a deal, there's an enormous financial pressure not to bring it up unless you specifically ask. I'm not talking about illegal non-disclosure items. I'm talking about the 1,000 small things that live in the gray area. The HOA that's been fighting over its reserve fund for 2 years. The 3 other buyers who passed on this home already because, well, they chose not to say. The distribution center that opened nearby and changed the traffic pattern on a road you're going to be driving on twice a day. None of that's required disclosure, but any or all of it could change your decision. The rule I use with every client is simple. If I know something that would affect your decision, I tell you. My job is to help you buy the right home, not just any home. What should you do? Well, ask directly. What do you know about this property that might make me want to reconsider? Watch carefully. A good agent will have something meaningful to say. Next is the buyer's agent conflict of interest. You see, back in 1992, all agents represented the seller. You flew into town, spent the better part of 3 or 4 days in the car with your agent, sharing about your life and your hopes and your dreams and the excitement and stress of your move to Georgetown. Then you find out they legally represent the seller. Seriously? That's like getting Michael Jordan to referee a Bulls game. How much sense does that make? Well, that all changed in '93 when legal representation in real estate went through an overhaul. As a result, your buyer's agent is on your side now. In theory, in financial reality, most transactions pay an agent, buyer, and seller from the same proceeds. The higher price you pay, the higher commission the buyer's agent earns. Many builders pay higher commissions than resale homes and add bonuses for agents, which puts more money in their pocket at closing. Does that mean your agent's going to work against you? No, but there is a structural incentive that doesn't line up with your goal to pay as little as possible or get the absolute best home. Reminds me of a retired pastor whom I admire and respect. He never looked at the donations to his church because he never wanted to treat anyone different based on their financial gifts. Now, is it possible that a 5-figure bonus would change the way an agent advises you? Maybe not. In theory, it shouldn't, but I think you and I both know it could have an impact. In a market like Georgetown right now, homes are averaging about 2.7% below list price. 65% of homes have had reductions in prices, and so there's a gap between asking and selling price. A good agent's going to find that. The key question to ask an agent directly is, how are you compensated? Does your commission change based on the sale price? Are you receiving bonuses? A good agent's going to give you a straight answer and tell you exactly how it works and how they negotiate on your behalf. An agent who deflects or gets defensive is showing you something kind of important. By the way, that's one reason that bonuses offered to me are applied to my client's price or to incentives for my client. Next, inspections and the pressure to go easy. In competitive markets or with competitive homes, agents can push buyers to write clean offers, meaning no inspection contingency or a shortened inspection window. And the argument is that, well, it makes your offer more attractive. What it also does is transfer the risk from unknown defects from the seller to you. This matters in just about every market. In certain areas of the market, a standard home inspection is going to flag, for example, visible cracks, but it's not a structural assessment. Foundation repair in Georgetown can range from $3,000 to $30,000, depending on the severity. I've seen buyers in this market waive inspections and discover problems within the first year that nobody told them to look for. My advice is very straightforward to you and to every one of my clients. Never waive your right to know what you're buying. Always hire your own inspector. Hire a licensed structural engineer. You need a dedicated foundation review, not just a general inspection. And don't just hire a foundation company. Some agents are going to recommend that. Now that can be sufficient under some circumstances until it's not. Then it can be very costly. I had a situation the year before last where the foundation was flagged by the inspector. I represented the seller. It was then inspected by a foundation company who recommended $16,000 worth of repairs to improve the foundation. I had my seller contact an engineer who in turn said there's no problem whatsoever after a very thorough evaluation. He actually mentioned he wasn't even sure why the foundation company was called at all. Now, the foundation company's paperwork simply pointed out that they felt it would be improvement to do the work on the slab. Well, I'm sure it would, and I'm sure they believe that fully. However, that's kind of like putting new tires on a car that only has 5,000 miles on the current tires. Sure, it's an improvement, but it's not needed. So inspections are an important part of the process, and diligence in those inspections is critical. Another area where home buyers a lot of times do not get all the answers is the real cost of home ownership. Agents can quote price and monthly mortgage, but they rarely walk through the full annual cost of owning a home. That's the number that really matters to you when you're deciding whether you can afford a home. Here's what that looks like in Georgetown specifically, but no matter where you're buying, it's an important factor. The property tax rate here is about 1.82%. Now, the median annual tax bill in Georgetown is around $6,674. If you're 65 or older, it's your primary residence, you've got some tools to manage this. Georgetown voters approved a senior property tax freeze, which means your taxes will not go up from there. But you can also apply for a homestead exemption, which reduces your taxable value up to 20% in Williamson County. And the state now provides a $140,000 school district exemption on your primary residence. Now, no schools don't matter to you if you're retired, but that tax savings certainly should matter. You know, a lot of buyers don't know to ask about these exemptions, and there's a lot of savings there. Now, when you add maintenance reserves of 1 to 2% of the purchase price per year, and homeowners use on an average can be about $1,500 to $2,000 annually. Then we add homeowners insurance and the possibility of a tax reassessment after you close. Have your agent walk you through the whole cost of owning that home. You don't want any surprises. And along these lines, I actually have a simple spreadsheet that shows you the different cost of living in different areas of Georgetown, because the tax rates vary wildly and HOE fees vary wildly. Again, it's a simple spreadsheet, but it provides a lot of detailed information. Everyone who looks at it tells us how helpful it is. That's a page in the Ultimate Retirement Guide for Georgetown, Texas, so feel free to download that anytime, of course. It's in the description below. I've seen this as a real estate broker and as an appraiser. Yes, I used to be an appraiser as well. And that's sales comparables can be cherry-picked. When an agent gives you an analysis to justify a listing price or validate an offer price, they're making choices. What sales to include, which ones to leave out. And that's a judgment call. And judgment calls can be influenced by the outcome the agent is hoping for. In Georgetown's current market, that matters more than it has in years. You see, right now, about 60 to 65% of active listings have seen price drops. The average price reduction is around $25,000. The data is moving fast, and the selection of which comparables to use can easily justify a price that's 5 to 8% higher than the market will bear currently. I've actually seen analysis and appraisals that excluded lower price sales on the same street. An excuse was that they were outliers. I've also seen comparables used with upgrades to justify a price with a home that actually still needed some work. Now, this data is real, and data can be retrieved all over the board. The selection of that data is not always neutral. So what should you do? Well, maybe you ought to look at the market and pull your own comps from real estate portals. Not because your agent isn't going to be truthful with you, but because an informed buyer asks better questions and catches selection bias before it costs them money. And that's another tough question that needs to be dealt with. Will this home appraise for what we're paying for it in our contract? And yes, because I used to be an appraiser, I have a pretty in-depth understanding of valuations and which comparables should or should not be used. Let's talk about neighborhood trajectory. Agents tend to sell the present, not the future. And agents tend to describe the neighborhood as they see it today. What they really provide is the data behind where a neighborhood could be heading. And that's no matter where you buy it. Now in Georgetown, the market has shifted. Homes peaked in 2022 and have slipped by price and price per square foot ever since. Fortunately, this last year's slippage was the least we've seen, but inventory has climbed above 5 months in most cases, even above 10 in some pockets. That doesn't mean Georgetown isn't a strong long-term buy. I've been here over 3 decades and I believe the fundamentals are strong in Georgetown. But ask your agent for a 5-year history of the current zip code, because the 5 micro markets in Georgetown, for example, perform differently. A lot of agents sell homes in Georgetown, but few truly understand the Georgetown real estate market. And it is not predicting the future when you show someone a 5 or 10-year history of different neighborhoods. I hope that makes sense, because that's going to be extremely helpful. So if you're buying a home in Georgetown, Texas, and you're looking at the property tax and thinking, oh, that's what my payment's going to be, you could be in for a shock, because a lot of times property taxes are reassessed after a closing. You may have experienced this if you've lived in Texas. If you've come from a state that doesn't do that, it could be a big surprise. You see, the previous owner's tax rate could stay locked for years. You may be looking at a home where the seller's been paying taxes on a value far below what the home is actually worth today. In Texas, that protection doesn't transfer to you when you purchase the home. When you buy a home in Georgetown, Texas, the Williamson County Central Appraisal District resets that assessed value to reflect what you paid for the home. The good news is that once you establish your primary residence and file your homestead exemption with the Williamson County Appraisal District, 2 important protections kick in. First, the Williamson County homestead exemption can reduce your taxable value by up to 20%, and you receive a $140,000 school district exemption on your primary residence. And the 10% appraisal cap applies from year to year. Now keep in mind, if they try to assess it for more than you paid for it, you can appeal and just take your closing statement to the appraisal district to show them what you actually paid. The deregulated electricity market, nobody really explained. You see, most buyers coming from outside of Georgetown have never lived in a deregulated energy market. And the difference matters in ways that don't show up on a listing sheet. In a regulated area, your electricity provider is determined by your address. There's one company, one rate, you show up, that's it. However, in Texas, there are areas that are deregulated. Now, the interesting thing about Georgetown is that part of it is deregulated. A large portion of Georgetown has to use Georgetown City Electric Services, but a large part of the market can choose their own electric provider. Residents in Georgetown, on the average, spend about $194 a month on electricity, but that number depends heavily on the plan you choose and your usage pattern. Now, keep in mind, Georgetown also had its own local charges. Inside the city limits, when you use Georgetown Electric, you pay a little extra, including 8.25% local fees on top of your electric bill. In the summer, when Georgetown regularly exceeds 90 and even over 100 degrees for extended periods, the demand on your air conditioning can push monthly bills even higher than the annual average. What most agents never explain is that you can shop for and select your electricity provider in many areas of Georgetown, and the rates can vary by 30, even 50%, depending on the plan you choose. My advice, before you close, visit powertochoose.org, which is the Public Utility Commission of Texas's official comparison tool. Another point from a local perspective, expansive clay and foundation risk. Some of Georgetown sits on what geologists call blackland prairie. It's a dominant soil that absorbs water and expands when wet, and then contracts and pulls away from foundations when dry. That's why a lot of inspectors recommend you water your foundation. I know some people have never heard of that. There's a lot of stress on foundations when it's dry and then wet, which can happen in Central Texas with prolonged dry periods and then heavy rain. Foundation repair in Georgetown ranges from about $3,000 to over $30,000, depending on the severity. And that sits entirely outside what most homeowners' insurance policies are going to cover, because soil movement movement isn't typically in an insurance policy. The warning signs are specific: sticking doors, windows that weren't always sticky, diagonal cracks in drywall, or exterior cracks. For any property built before 2000 or any property where you see even one of those many signs, I strongly recommend to invest in a dedicated foundation inspection. And I would recommend a licensed structural engineer, not just a foundation company. A lot of people use foundation companies because they're very inexpensive or even free. But I've seen multiple foundation companies come up with a different answer than a licensed engineer. And guess who's the real authority? It's that engineer. And now, how to find a good agent. Everything I've shared in this video is information you deserve to have before you hire someone. But the most important question is still this: how do you actually find an agent who'll give that information to you, who'll answer those questions clearly, even if it costs them a commission? Here are the 5 questions I think every buyer should ask before signing a buyer's representation agreement. And remember, a buyer's representation agreement is required before you look at homes. First, what would make you advise me not to buy a particular home? A good agent is going to have a specific answer. Second question, have you ever talked to a client out of a purchase that looked good on the surface? Ask them to share the story with you. The specifics of that answer are going to tell you everything you need to know about how that agent operates. Thirdly, how are you compensated, and does your commission change based on the sale price? Fourth question, who do you refer for inspections? Do you have a favorite, or will you give me a list of inspectors? 5, what are the 3 most significant risks of buying in this specific Georgetown market? Beyond those 5 questions, watch for behavior. A good agent is going to take note on what you don't like in a showing. They'll point out problems before you even ask. They'll tell you if a listing is overpriced. To verify any agent before you commit, you can look them up on the Texas Real Estate Commission website, trec.texas.gov. Every licensed agent has a searchable public record. And ask the agent for references from buyers, not just sellers, but buyers, and how that transaction went and whether they were straightforward with them. Here's what I'll say about my own practice. I do something extremely rare in real estate. I offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and I invest my personal funds in your success. Yes, I'm going to pay for your visit to Georgetown, Texas. If you're serious about moving to Georgetown, I'm going to pay for your trip. You can get the details in my Ultimate Retirement Guide. The link to that is in the description. I've walked away from commissions. I've sat with clients in front of a house that they loved and told them why I couldn't recommend it. Didn't always make them happy, but they always appreciated my honesty. And I do invite you to hold me the same standard I've described in this video. If you come to me and you feel like I've given you a non-answer or dodged a question, call me out on it. That's the deal I have with every client I work with. Most buyers only find out what their agent wasn't telling them after the keys are in their hand and the problems start showing up. So this video showed you what to ask, what to watch for, and what to demand from anyone you choose to work with in Georgetown, Texas. If you're thinking about moving to Georgetown, or you're trying to figure out which lane is the right one for you in Georgetown, reach out anytime. No hassle, no obligation, no pressure. I'm a little old-fashioned, so always respond to texts and voicemails personally. I hope to meet you soon, and remember, it's your choice, so make it a powerful day.